University of Memphis and run the 110s and the 400 hurdles there. So he was great at the technical aspect, and I never had to really worry about that. But the one thing that he always wanted was he wanted his hurdler, and he wanted the hurdlers all the time. And a lot of times I would look over and they were just, doing a lot of hurdle drills, which I thought was awesome. But I'm like, Stevan, that kid runs 22.3 in the 200. We need him to do a lot of other things. And so he and I kind of worked together on creating, kind of a shared plan. And then after I went to Ladue, I went to another school, and we didn't really have a hurdles coach. We had a guy who knew the technical aspect, but it was kind of a volunteer. And so, again, this idea of, well, we've got to be able to get these kids to be doing a lot of other things for us. So when I think about it, I think about it as, just principles of sprint training, right? So most of our high school kids are not going to be a pure sprinter, a pure jumper, a pure hurdler, right? That's all they do. Occasionally we have a few of those kids. A lot of times it's the kids that I'm trying to convince to come out for track for the first time because they're a basketball kid or a volleyball girl. And okay, you can mainly just jump, or we're going to introduce you can just hurdle. But then we start progressing them and getting them to other things. Understanding the actual training age of the athlete. So how long they've been doing track, how much experience they have within track. I'll talk very briefly just about kind of the idea of energy systems and what are you trying to focus on training for that particular day. But knowing the why of what you're doing as we go through, I don't necessarily like the idea of, well, this is the sprint workout, so we're just going to throw hurdles in front of a hurdle. But what is the purpose for it? And then being able to make adjustments and just kind of trusting your gut. So I took these things and said, okay, well, how can we do this and still make kids fast and be able to perform at their best for the hurdles? So when it comes to hurdles in general, and I never really worried about this when I was just a sprints coach, I wanted to keep the fastest kids for me. I didn't want to necessarily share them. Now, as a head coach, I absolutely believe that when it comes to hurdles, when it comes to jumping in these technical events, I really do want the best athletes in those events. But choosing the wrong candidates, so to me, yes, you could take a stud, your best kid, and put him in these events, and that would be awesome. But a lot of times I feel like take the kid that is maybe number 3, number 4, as your 400 runner or your 200 runner. And a lot of times those might be the best kids when it comes to the hurdles. Again, too much emphasis, too much time placed on just the technical elements of hurdling, right, and going through drills. To me, this one is key, and I'm kind of going through this a little bit with my assistant coach, who we've been together for probably 8 years now, and I love him, and he is awesome. But we kind of have this conversation that, hey, just like every kid is not a 100-meter runner and a 400-meter, not every kid is a short hurdler and a long hurdler. Again, regular intervals with, just kind of putting a hurdle in front of the kid, and I'll talk about, not considering the placement, the spacing, the height of the hurdles, those kind of things. And then just in general, especially when we talk about the long hurdles, there's not enough emphasis placed on that anaerobic, glycolytic, lactic threshold kind of training. And so these are the easiest areas to make gains, because this is the work that kids are not doing when they come to us from another sport. Right? They're not in their off season saying, you know what, I want to go do a workout, to prepare for football season that's going to make me feel like I ran a 400. But they'll go and do agility ladder and plyometrics and short sprints and all that kind of stuff. And that effect, especially when we talk 400, 300-meter hurdles, that ability for the body to buffer that lactic acid and make the muscles work hinders them, right? And most of our kids, are at 40 seconds and beyond when they're running a 300 hurdle race. So I kind of make it very simple for myself. So when I'm thinking about a hurdler or putting a kid in the hurdles and how we're going to set it up, rule number 1, make them as fast as possible for 200 and 400 meters. Pretty simple. If I'm trying to figure out, well, what should so-and-so do today, or what event should we put so-and-so in, or how should we progress a young kid learning the hurdles, here's rule number 1. Are we getting this kid faster for 200, for 400 meters? Rule number 2, teaching them to alternate. So I was not a hurdler, so I don't know what it's like to run a hurdle race and, to be 150 meters in, halfway through the race, and counting steps and worried about, am I on the correct leg, and, all that kind of stuff. So we need to make sure they can alternate legs. Rule number 3, teach them to run the race backwards. This is coach that was my mentor. He was one of the best coaches in any event that I've ever been around, but he used this term, run the race backwards. And so that means, we look at a typical hurdle race, and most kids will look at it as, I'm going to sprint, get over the hurdle, I'm going to sprint, I'm going to get over the hurdle. And it's just kind of that pattern going through. And what the idea of running it backwards means, we're going to flip that. So while everybody else is thinking about sprinting in between the hurdles, we're going to think about the segment we sprint involves the hurdle. And so I'll talk about that 7 meters before the hurdle, 7 meters after the hurdle. That's the part that we are going to really attack. We're going to run that, kind of run it backwards from what most kids would normally do. And that helps us with not losing speed over the hurdle. So we look at it as like, that's an opportunity to gap the other hurdlers, to put a gap on other sprinters. The hurdle is not the barrier that is in our way. That is the part of the race that we are attacking, that we are moving through. And then when in doubt, go back to rule number 1. Right? Ultimately, whatever the workout is, whatever we're trying to do, am I making this kid faster for 200 and 400? So a couple of examples here. And the sole reason for the examples is to highlight the faster those other events became for the kid, the faster their hurdle race became. So Jarek, I had Jarek. Jarek was interesting because he was, I got him his sophomore, junior, and senior year. Jarek was a kid that did AAU track with some club his whole life and thought, the way you get better at long jumping, at hurdling, at high jumping, he was great at all of those things, was to do the event over and over and over. I was like, no, there's a thing called training, Jarek. You're not a 12-year-old superstar anymore. You're a 16, 17-year-old high school athlete. So sophomore year, and I put for a lot of these examples, I have their splits on there, and if it was a 4x4, a lot of times at some of the meets, it was an FAT split. But as he got faster, his hurdle races got faster. And again, he was hurdling since he was probably 10 years old. So from a hurdle technique standpoint, he knew how to get over the hurdle. But once we started adding in training to get him faster for the 2 and the 4, his hurdle time started to drop. His senior year, I said 39:02 FAT, his first and only race. So despite Jarek being a multi-time state champion as all-state athlete as a sophomore and a junior, he decided his senior year it would be a good idea to make a return to basketball. So he made a return to basketball, and what does he do? He does something and tears something, small little thing in his knee. So he came out for track. We were able to get kind of one hurdle race in, and then ultimately decided, you know what, you're going to go run the open 4. We're not going to mess with the hurdles. So we didn't mess with the hurdles. So that's why he only ran 39:02, but he was 48.9 in the open. Another kid I have, so this is JU, and I put JU in red because actually his senior year was this kid's sophomore year, so when I switched schools. But JU hated running the 4. Hated running a 4x4. You can even, he ran 37.4 as a junior and was only splitting 50 point on 4x4. That running 21 and he's only splitting 50 point. And that's purely indicative of JU didn't want to do the work to really get faster at the 4, and get after it for the 400. But he was a short hurdler. He was a phenomenal athlete. So he was able to do both hurdle races. This young lady, Shay. So Shay came to us her senior year. Her junior year, and the key thing with her is that she, again, the school she was at before she came to us, knew how to coach the Shay was a good technician over the hurdle, but Shay had no training. So she wasn't really it's not, I mean, we didn't do anything magic to make her go from 46 to 42, to go from 17 to 14. But what we did was we made her faster in the 2 and the 4. And a lot of that was just simply training, because she knew how to hurdle, so we didn't have to spend a whole lot of time from a technical standpoint. And then last year we had this kid, Dylan Hawthorne. And so those are Dylan's PRs, and you can see Dylan was a heck of an athlete, right? But this was Dylan's kind of typical track meet. Typical track meet, Dylan was in the high jump, he was in the 300 hurdles, and then he was in some combination of 2 relays for us usually. And so he can't do, 900 meters worth of racing at a high level if he's not trained to do it. And I said, 22 high, and that was a hand time, 4x2 hand time splits. But I called him, he was a serviceable leg. He wasn't the fastest kid, but he didn't hurt the relay, right? And that's how most of our relays we put together are not for studs. It's, kids that are serviceable. And so Dylan, though, I also put up here, so here was his 300 hurdle race progression from last year. So we started the season, and this was probably a wind-dated meet at some point. But he was hovering around 43, 41 seconds. And at this time, he was still splitting probably 50